Hey, welcome to NextMeta, a podcast and a newsletter about on-chain economies, coordination, most effective tactics, and the bigger picture. Serious topics and a not-so-serious host. Hope you enjoy. Welcome, Yalor and Stacey, to the NextMeta podcast.
Thank you. We're amped to be here. I feel like the meta follows me everywhere I go, so it's fun to see what the next meta is.
Awesome. Yalor, I've known Yalor for many years. He contributed a lot to MetaGame, to MetaCartel, to Gitcoin. He's currently at Eigenlayer, right?
Eigen Foundation, yeah.
Eigen Foundation, organizing MCON, MetaCamp, MetaCampus. So like the guy is all over the place. And Stacey, unfortunately, I've just met. We met at MetaFest briefly. But unfortunately, I don't know much about you yet, so I couldn't introduce you properly. So Yalor got all the spotlight. So please,
I'm gonna introduce Stacey because I feel like she deserves a royal introduction. Stacey is the chief executive executor and vibes curator of MCON. She's been working in the space for a handful of years, and she jumped on board to help organize and structure the conference, as her experience with events like DevCon and DAppCon and other events around the world is crucial. But I think the key thing that I find interesting and compelling about Stacey's work is her passion for narrative design and storytelling in this ecosystem, which is something we desperately need more of. Stacey Fronic, everyone.
Yeah, that's a good summary. A little context for that is I started out as I've always had this passion for storytelling and really changing the world through story. So like all ambitious and idealistic people who want to tell stories, I went into the film industry, needed to pay my bills. So that turned into advertising. And then, a few years down the line, was producing lots of big commercials and all kinds of really fun stuff, but realized that, I'm starting to feed this and just feeding this data system of social media and these algorithms. And that is what led me to Web3, is starting to look at these systems. And so now I take those same skill sets and really work with them in this ecosystem. And that's kind of what brought us to MCON, is telling the story of MCON and telling the story of this broader cultural movement that's going on, and giving some spaces for people to advance that narrative.
Love it. And how did you two meet? Like, how did you first get involved in MetaCamp and MCON?
I blame Dr. Zach Robinson of the Protocol Labs ecosystem, who is now working at the Pocket Foundation. Stacey was one of the contributors to a project called the Cantina back in the day, which was a aspiring attempt at doing a Creators Guild DAO initiative, spun out of the PL ecosystem. Stacey had probably more experience than any of us doing this kind of work before, so she was a mainstay in the chats, and we started to collaborate on the GM bus. Stacey was actually one of our kind of like overseers and project instigators when we're setting up the GM bus to do the cross-country tour and interviews, all that fun stuff. So we first started collaborating there. It feels like 3 years ago now.
I think that was 2 years now. I think that was the first activation, I think, was at MCON 2022.
That's right. MCON II at the schoolhouse in Denver. We had the whole GM bus gang, which was Sinjin from Bankless, Crypto, Bushi, Stacey, Dan the Man Rodman, myself, and Stacey, all kind of like getting the bus into its state of readiness for activating. And as you saw at MCON. Oh wait, you weren't at MCON, were you? The two.
I wasn't at the second one.
Oh
yeah.
Okay,
I skipped the first one, but
the first one. That's right. The first one was vibes. It was vibes for sure. It'll be interesting to see, though. Speaking of MCON, like now that we're like MCON 1, like all right, let's just do it. Brewery. MCON 2, let's really do it. Like we big schoolhouse, and then MCON 3, it's like, okay, like now what to expect? What's it gonna feel like? What's it gonna be? That's actually why I felt it like was necessary to bring on more professional and capable help, because the conference has expanded beyond the point of my capabilities. So we need someone who actually knows what they're doing to help organize it.
Got too serious.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we do have a great team now, a bunch of amazing contributors, and then Stacey kind of running point with everyone.
Before we get into that, where is the GM bus? Like where the fuck is it?
It's right here. It is readily available for all Meta fam to take activations or road trips or go hold posters at colleges. I am safeguarding it here at the Meta Hub in North Carolina.
All right. And for people who don't know the GM bus and the first story, you want to give a TLDR?
Yeah. The GM bus was, initially it was a concept that was kind of brainstormed by Sinjin, who is an artist, creative designer coming from the Bankless ecosystem. And he wanted to do like a pop-up crypto education series, like around the country, and do like shows or podcasts or just get people engaged. And the prompt that was created for that was, what if it turned out better than you imagined? And we took that prompt and we started to create like stories and journeys and interview people and say like, so like you're working in this ecosystem, you believe that change is possible, that evolution and growth is something we want to aspire to. So like in your ideal worldview, if it turned out better than you imagined, what does that look like? So it got people curious, asking questions, and starting to talk and think about what they want to see happen and how they could participate in affecting that change. And it was super fun. Like, it was great. We went all over the country. It didn't make it out of the US, unfortunately. It's still, you can still ship it across the world. We'll send it to Croatia if you want. But it did
there were
go,
talks about getting it to MetaFest.
It went all the way from New York to San Francisco and back, like all the way around. It's been a cool journey. But yeah, we interviewed a lot of people. The most crucial thing that we did is just activate people on site. So going to events like Consensus, SmartCon, ETH Denver, MCON, and just like having conversations with people about this concept of like it being better, the future being better than you imagine. And it got a lot of resonance. People were really excited. They were really inspired. And a lot of people that were just like, you know, normal human beings were like, what is that? What does that mean? And it was a wedge to start having conversations with them and to start sharing like what we envision as a brighter future powered by blockchains and, you know, community governance. And it was definitely not the first experiment of its kind. There is the Bitcoinetta, which is a Bitcoin van that travels around Latin America. But one of the first ones in the US that was kind of like trying to seed a no brand like oversight, like just pure like instigation of conversation. Because you know, obviously this is a thing seeded by many different projects as a promotional campaign. And yeah, so it's a super sweet mobile command station, Mercedes Sprinter bus that is ready to be deployed to your Web3 events, if and when you're watching this and you want that.
Awesome. Have you seen the Solar Punk bus? I don't know, what is it called? Can't remember, the one by Urbanica.
By Urbanica?
Yeah, Umberto and Anna. They bought an old school bus and they're converting it into a Solar Punk bus, like with solar panels and like all the, really trying to make it like running on biofuel and shit.
Oh,
and,
wow. Yeah.
They're gonna travel. They're gonna travel
just running
South
the
America.
bus. Just running the bus for us was a process, but running like a solar punk bus that actually runs on like sustainable fuels would be a whole nother.
Yeah.
We felt accomplished because we actually got the thing built and started touring with it. We were like, wow, it's huge, like from idea to execution. But I'm not.
And the next generation is inspired.
That's right. I think the next generation will be like GM sailboat or GM blimp, perhaps, like whatever. It's just like it's sovereign. It flies across the skies. It never touches the ground again. It has its own jurisdiction.
GM blimp. I can see that. I can totally see that.
People would love it. They just see it. They'd be like, "What? What? Oh, it's the GM blimp."
And okay, so let's go further back. So GM Bus partially got funded by MetaCartel, one of the OG DAOs from way back, and some people don't even know it. Like it's so old that people a lot of people still weren't even in the space, or maybe they forgot about it. So you want to share more about it and like some of the top learnings over the years?
Yeah, MetaCartel specifically. Wow. So MetaCartel was my foothold into the ecosystem right after like I started to work. It was like this. It was like Giveth, right? I started working on Giveth, which was a blockchain-based nonprofit initiative helping to do transparent donations and public goods work. And then from that, I spun out so far of the ecosystem that I landed in Hawaii, and I was like, I'm just going to mess around on the beach for a while and see how that happens. And then I started reading these
fished back.
That's right. These really weird blog posts from yours truly, Peeth, about meta coordination and like many different divergent topics. Anyway, I was like super pilled by Metagame, started working more on Metagame, and then found out that Metagame was a project that was like kind of housed inside of the MetaCartel ecosystem. And so after contributing to Metagame and finding out about what they were trying to do there and becoming like, you know, whatever, an ecosystem supporter, I started to jump into MetaCartel, running hackathons, doing events, you know, engaging wherever possible, kind of reviewing some of the grant proposals and digesting like what was happening there and what wanted to happen. From there, like Raid Guild, DAO House, all these other initiatives that were kind of being spun up at the same time. But MetaCartel has always felt like an incubator or an innovator of crazy ideas, right? Where it's like, I don't know, like let's just throw some money at this and see what works. So a ton of grant funding went out across the ecosystem to projects like yours, projects like mine, seeding crazy ideas, basically. Obviously, like a subset of the MetaCartel folks went on to create MetaCartel Ventures, which is the first venture DAO on Ethereum. I joined that later as well. And it was very cool, but less interesting than MetaCartel to me, actually. I think that the strong alignment and the kind of experimental nature of MetaCartel allowed for us to move fast, support teams, and, you know, have like a brand halo that was like much, much more significant and impactful than a lot of brands that are trying to start as organizations. But MetaCartel was never a for-profit business. It never had the intention of making any money. It was just a really strong values-aligned group of builders, developers, and friends, really. So I would say that most of my Web3 friends have come from MetaCartel, either directly or indirectly. And there's no price you can pay for that. It's a life-shifting experience when you meet a group of people who you feel aligned with and you like to collaborate with. And definitely MetaCartel enabled a lot of that.
Right. And now we're on like a third generation from MetaCartel. Like we had MetaCartel, then we had Metagame, Raid Guild, the DAO House, Meta Factory, and probably more DAOs spin out of MetaCartel. And now we had like Quest Chains and MetaLink spin out of Metagame. Grand Ship, like what is it Grand Ships?
Yeah, I think there's
Grand
a tie
Ships. There. I think it's Grand Ships, but I'm not completely sure. From DAO House, you know, and Yeeter. And Raid Guild also like built a bunch of different products that spun out into their own teams. And probably soon some of those teams are going to have their own DAO spinning out.
Yeah.
So there's a whole lineage.
I mean, there's teams like Hats Protocol that were like, you know, incubated by folks who were working on Raid Guild or collaborating on DAO House. And they've moved in to create their own like real world products now that are solving governance issues that we're super jazzed about. And you know, Eigen works with Hats now as well. So it's like there's a lot of like cross collaborative tissue that has been like seeded and strengthened through the instantiation of MetaCartel and its network relationships, like huge relationships. Actually, that would be really interesting if we were able to like track all of the threads between contributors across projects in the ecosystem and see where they led to today. Because I think they're a lot more impactful than we imagine.
Yeah,
we know it. We know it in our hearts.
That would be super
right?
cool. Yeah, that's just from the core group of like 100 people, not even counting like all the connections that happened at MCON 1, MCON 2, MetaFest, like all the online events and whatever.
Yeah. What was the online event that you ran? It was like
the first one, Intercon.
Intercon. Yeah, that was back when like before online events were cool. Now everyone does the online event. It's kind of like a cop out. And now
that was like the first event when COVID hit.
Yeah, it was like we need something to stay aligned, and so do 3-day conferences. And now I'm feeling like the return to physicality is like, no, I just want to be in the same space with my friends. I don't want to be in like a massive conference hall with 5,000 people, but I would like to be in like a few rooms with 100 to 300 people and jam on ideas, which is the motivation for MCon, right? Let's get the gang back together. Let's get people back, people who are interested in these topics in the same room and see what comes out of it. Because we never really know, but after doing it so many times, we know that the outcome is always positive and really useful for people as well.
Right, definitely. And before we get into MCon, I want to hear a bit more from Stacey. It's just been you and me talking, so I want to hear if Stacey has some cool stories, so like some of the most interesting things that happened in your Web3 journey, or like the biggest things you learned, or whatever you feel like.
Yeah, I guess my Web3 journey really began 2021 when I just started checking it out. I'm newer, I suppose, in that sense to the ecosystem, and that first time was really mostly just like getting scanned by meme coins and stuff. So,
Imagine coming into the ecosystem with meme coins and being like, okay, which of these Politicoins do I buy now? Like,
I know
that wasn't a thing when we started.
The values thing of like, like Bitcoin and Ethereum and DAOs and NFTs, got you interested, right? Like I was like, this stuff is cool. Like this stuff has got some legs. Let's see where it goes. And then I'm just like perusing Twitter. I'm like, is this like, is this meme coin the thing that I'm supposed to, is this how I get involved? So, I mean, I think in many ways, I think my story is very much so like a mass adoption sort of story of like coming in through just the channels you would think, but staying around because I came for like sort of the pre-existing reasons. And then just, it really was like, I met Yalor by just showing up at ETH Denver. Somebody told me ETH Denver 2022. They were like, there's this thing called ETH Denver. It's happening. And I just met someone in line who introduced me to the aforementioned Zach, who like is how I met Yalor and a bunch of friends and homies. So I think actually, through that process, that community that I just sort of serendipitously connected with originally has ended up staying with me over the 2 years, like not always in a linear fashion, but they've sort of stuck with the same, the same vibes, the same people. And I think that's probably the broader story. I think of that I want other people to get to experience is just sort of this, even a life lesson of like kind of throwing yourself out there and saying like, I want to do something that means something to me. And I'm going to, show up at is this a tech conference? Like thing, and just like stand in line for hours knowing no one and just see what happens. And then sort of following those threads over the course of a few years and, ending up like, Yalor mentioned, I got to work at DevCon with Shelling Point, with WalletCon, like a bunch of really cool events that have taken place. And then now MCon, these are really incredible events that represent different facets of the Web3 community. And I think just really, society, like as a whole, like where civilization is going, and just getting to be part of those things in some ways are just sort of, taking a little bit of a risk and being willing to be confused and being willing to, having the luxury of being able to lose money on meme coins and just some perseverance, sticking around. But yeah, I think it's a more common story than, I hope it becomes an even more common story in the future of people who stick around through some of the rugs and the scams and maybe they stick around for the vibes. They stick around for the people that they met IRL. And I think that's really the thing that keeps me going and that I'm most excited about is these IRL experiences where we can be together and actually develop, relationships and build products and build ideas together and really see where that goes. So I think that's the most exciting thing happening in the meta of Web3.
Right. Yeah, and you really like you have to dig deeper to to get here, to get to this stuff, because like as you said, like, first you go through meme coins, get scammed in meme coins, or like I still get scammed in meme coins like 6 years into the space or even more. I mean, here since 2016 and I still get scammed. But you need to go through that, and you need to start meeting people, and then just deeper and deeper, and then you end up in MetaCamp, and it's like, what? How did I get here?
Yeah, you end up like in a meta world where you're like, wait, all of my really good friends are people who work at different projects across the ecosystem. A lot of them are freelancers, but like I trust these people. I respect these people. Like I've actually like Stacey and I's story is like, I liked her as a person, like just the way she showed up and the way she worked with people before I ever thought about like working with her. And then when I was like, I have a need for an executor who's just I need someone amazing who's just like so good and who's like a version of me but does things totally different. And so when we started talking and spent more time together, I was like, oh, if you would even be willing to do this, it would be so much better if we could work together on this versus like hiring a professional services company. Not that she is a professional services company, but like hiring a random professional services company to do events, right? Where they would make it an event, but it would not be as aligned with like the meaning and the purpose of the things we're trying to do, because those people come from outside and they look at a thing, okay, it's a tech event, all right, we'll like have this and that, and they got preloaded things, versus this relationship, which is more, it's undefined. We're like exploring and teasing out threads that are interesting to us and also people who are, stakeholders in helping make the event happen, to find what content would be really meaningful, what would be really cool, what would inspire people coming to the event to be like, oh, I love that. That really aligns with my worldview or like how I see things. And that's the benefit of working with friends, who you can have like a deeper relationship where you're like not always on the clock. Sometimes you're just riffing or sharing ideas. And I see that it is this really interesting way of like, it's a new way of working. Work with your friends, respect the people that you work with, enjoy spending time with them, and like develop professional skills and personal skills at the same time, like in parallel. That's the thing that I'm like really passionate about. And I'm also working on, like, work on your personal skills so you can be a better like contributor or collaborator in the Web3 ecosystem.
Right.
Building in community is supposed to look like is that we all kind of show up together and we're connected through some common set of values that may not even be like super clear to define or easily defined, but that there's the sense of it, there's the energy of it, if you will. And then we just kind of grow and build and collaborate together and grow as humans. You can't, this whole like work-life split is completely made up, right? Like it was made up by industrialists and all this, but it never used to be a thing where you're like, oh yeah, I go to work in the fields and then I come home with my wife and kids and, or I go pick berries and like, kill squirrels and then that's made up. And so I think we're seeing this return to that integration of the two. And there's a lot of work to be done as that happens, where, you have this like integration of society, but there is like a lot of reward and benefit, I think, as we move in that direction. And I think maybe that's what keeps people coming back now, in Web3 is this, it's crazy, but my best friends are the ones I work with and I see at conferences, but I talk to them and they help me grow as a human. And I think that's a really interesting thing going on right now.
That's really interesting. I also like have been coming at it from the other side, is like, what are the benefits to families and friends and like your personal like network from working in this industry, right? Versus working in AI or working in, computing. Like what benefits and what opportunities are enabled for like you to bring your whole self like to the picture, right? And I think ideologically there's a lot to offer here, where it's like we build things we care about because we care about our work. We want to invest our energy into places that move the needle for society. And so many of us are doing that in different avenues: art, governance, distributed systems, decentralized finance even. It's all aligns with the thing that we're actually interested in. Because at the end of the day, like if you have all the money in the world and you retire from some company, but you're like miserable and you do work that's like extractive, how satisfying and fulfilling is that for you personally? If like your network of friends and relationships suffers because you had to work like a dog on something you didn't care about, versus like a balanced approach, which is I co-create with people that I respect and I work with people who inspire me, and I'm in a place where I'm actually really grounded and balanced with all I have. And I do think we're like in a place where we're probably too far on the opposite end, where it's not balanced enough. It's more like all the work and all the collaborations and all the things we can do inspire us, but there will be a time where we come back, especially as we get older. I have a little girl now who's almost 3 years old, and so the need to like pause, put things down, go outside, spend time in the park is like very strong, versus people who are like in their mid-20s or late or early 30s or something and haven't had that experience yet. You could find yourself like working all the time, right? Because it's so interesting. It's so cool. There's so many different pathways you can go down, and I don't think a lot of industries allow for that.
I think that kind of connects back, I think, to both like the MetaCamp, MetaCampus, and MCON, because these are really all spaces where people can come and bring their whole selves, bring their families, bring their their whatever level of work-life balance, whatever the new version of that, you bring your whole self to that situation and contribute and be part of the community. And I think experiencing that at MetaCamp can be really transformative. And I think that's also sort of the table we're trying to set with MCON, is how do you scale this like smaller community gathering and actually bring 500, 600, 700 people together and allow all of those people to connect, not around a set of content that's just, that's set by some people who they didn't consult the community. You're just like, oh, these are interesting topics. For sure, there will be interesting content and talks and sessions and workshops. But what we're really trying to do is, those are just the ideas we want to infuse in a community. And what we're really trying to do is bring that community together, and it's the community that brings the value, and then allow those people to say, like, these are the things that we care most about, and make most of the time at this, conference is maybe a loose term for it. Make most of the time at MCON actually more about allowing people to bring their own ideas, build their relationships, make connections, start to brainstorm on ideas, poke holes in what's happening in the world right now, and then fill those holes together and actually build the new future that we all want to see. I think that's not something you get to experience or see a lot in other conferences and other types of experiences, because it's a little harder to orchestrate. I think we're still learning for sure what that's going to look like. It's all just experiments.
Right.
It'll be fun to see where it goes.
It feels like it also comes back to the silo problem, right? Everything is siloed on whatever ecosystem you're working in. So if you work at Microsoft, it's siloed around like creating revenue for shareholders and this company and moving computing forward. But like, if you work in an ecosystem that's made up of many different projects that are all like kind of like have a social aspect of them, where it's like we're trying to create something different to innovate, it allows for this like wider perspective on where we're going as a society, versus like working at a company that has shareholders, which is to drive shareholder value. It's a very different experience. Like, we get to co-create the culture here, versus those cultures, you get hired on and you get this salary and that's the culture. You're not really going to change the culture from the inside out.
Right. And it's also just a very different culture in these like spilling out from these companies to like tech conferences, and like you have tech conferences from tech companies who are very top down, and then like these conferences also like don't have a bigger story than talking about what they're gonna talk about, and it's a very like one way like relationship. You have the speakers who are these like executives from these companies. They speak to the audience, and audience is like a passive consumer of their speech, whereas like in Web3 it's not really like that. Whole lot of culture. Like, you don't get like at MetaFest we had I think at least 2 babies, and it's just like a bunch of dogs walking around. It just like felt wholesome.
You're saying that babies were made at MetaFest? That's a serious. That's a
maybe we had people fall in love at MetaFest, at least on the bus trip.
Great. That's a good sign. That's product market fit right there. I've actually been saying this for a while, is that like crypto events are product market fit for Web3. That's the closest thing we have like to something that actually people would pay for.
Yeah. What I was gonna say before, I don't know, but I guess it doesn't really matter. But yeah, we got into the topic of MCon for like the third time now without even me asking. So like all the topics lead back to MCon. So let's let's talk about MCon. Like how did you first came up with it, and like how it was the first kind of, it was very very much DAO focused, but it wasn't like a loud DAO event, and it wasn't near another big conference. So like it was a standalone event. It really attracted a lot of DAO veterans, like the people who are there who are in DAOs were people who have a lot of experience in DAOs. They didn't like come there to learn about DAOs. They were like already deep in the ecosystem, and it was very unique in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, so the conference itself was obviously like brainchild of Peter and myself and others who were at MetaCartel in the early days. It was like a result of going to so many events and being like, okay, like whatever, this is just another like tech conference symposium type of thing. And also feeling like some of the events that were out there were like overwhelming. Like just so much stuff's happening, so many people, and they got corporate very fast, where we're like, okay, these things make money now, obviously, so people are gonna like, you know, productize them. And we wanted to do something that was focused on DAOs, that brought together people who were opting in to that experience and people who were excited to share their own perspectives, their own experience with an audience of peers, and maybe people who are less in the ecosystem. But I think so the first one was about 350 people. I mean, the first one was like, you know, MCon 0. It was like 30 guys in a basement in Berlin or something, right? Which I wasn't at that. Sounds great though, right? And then
that wasn't even MCon. That was
what was that?
MetaCartel demo day.
Demo day, got it. So that was like a V0 for what this was. And then MCon 1. So we always go to ETH Denver every year in Denver, and it's frigidly cold. There's now like lines for getting in and stuff, so it's hard to coordinate around because there's so much happening, right? But we were also like, why is this happening in February every year? Like February, March is just a terrible time to be in Denver, because especially if people are outside and you're not just like skiing, right? And so we decided like, let's do the event that we want to do in Denver, a place that people are already used to going, but do it in the summer. So we chose September to avoid like LizCon and other events that were happening. We chose to specifically not do it around another event, and to have that be a filtration mechanism for people who want to come. It's like, it might not be convenient for your other travel schedules, but if you want to fly to Denver and hang out with a bunch of DAO nerds and talk about governance, we'll be there. And so it was 3 days in a brewery in downtown Denver. And it was also like a good time, I think, for the ecosystem. A lot of people were really excited, building new things. And so it was kind of like a perfect storm of factors. It's like our network of connections, friends, a cool time to be in the ecosystem, prices up, everyone's happy, and a chance for like to separate signal from noise. So the first MCon was like super high signal, right? A lot of people who were in the ecosystem just came to hang out, whether they were speakers or not. I think by noon every day, people had left the beer hall and they were outside talking to one another, doing circles on the lawn. And that was a great sign, because we were like, all right, no one wants to hear the speakers anymore. Not that they're not great, just that they're here to talk to one another. They're here to connect with one another. And now that they've all landed here, they want to spend that time in conversation. And so it was a great event. Like, it'll go down as one of my favorite events to have participated in and seen happen. And it stemmed from the need of having nothing else like this, no other place for us to come together, and doing it in a major metropolitan U.S. city, which is easy for everyone to get to. And so that was kind of how it played out. And inviting the right people was what it was all about. The whole conference was curated. You can't buy a ticket just directly. You have to like apply, and then kind of your Web3 work history is like scrubbed through, and your Twitter profiles, and we just look at the alignment, the kind of like things you talk about, the things you work on, the things you're interested in, and then approve or punt to next year. And that allowed for a really high signal group of people to come together, which worked really well, right? It was like just kind of a tactical process. Then MCON II was the extension of that. We wanted to do it again. It was a success, and we got a lot more partners on that one, a lot more people coming to support and participate. Lens, like MetaMask, we had Coordinate, like all these teams that were like, had been around or were launching new things, came and participated, and they brought a lot of value. They brought their communities as well. So it kind of like, it honed in on that, like, this is a community conference, right? It's like not a corporate conference, not a conference founded by one meta organization, but like by many groups coming together with the goal of sharing their experiences, their learnings, and gaining insight from one another, where they might not have been able to do that in their regular day-to-day work life, but they can do it if they're at a conference, because that's what that's for, basically. So I think just the success of the conferences, the amount of people who personally reached out to me and others saying, wow, that was so good. Why aren't all conferences not like that? Like, please keep doing this. This is amazing. We had people who like found their way in, and they're like, I was brand new to Web3, but like that conference helped me understand what's possible and the kinds of people that I can work with on this stuff. And they found collaborators, they found teammates, people were hiring. Like, it was a great kind of, if you're talking about a networking conference where the goal is to increase your network, to connect with people, to find aligned contributors, that was like the ultimate KPI. I don't know how to measure that because I'm like terrible at doing things like measuring KPIs. But I know from the conversations that were had for many years post that the results of that were deeply meaningful to a lot of people. So the brand itself, yeah, I think it was like, we never wanted to make it corporate. We still don't want to make it corporate. But we know that the event needs to happen because of the value that was created for attendees.
Then Stacey is coming on for this year to help narrow down the narrative. So let's hear more about that side.
Yeah, it's fun to be. I was at the last one in 2022. It coincided with the GM bus and my sort of entry into the ecosystem, and so it's really fun to like be part of this one, and has been interesting to explore because 2024 is a totally different year, not just for crypto, but in the world than 2022 and years prior. And so I think this is coming at a really good time for a lot of reasons. And everything from where our financial system is at, where our political system in the United States is at, and probably many other countries as well. It just comes at a good time for people to come back and reconnect with this vision. Like, what are we doing with this decentralization thing? What are we up to? And the interesting and fun thing for me with this in terms of sponsors, of course, coming from this advertising background, it's really cool to see how we're managing this and kind of and participate in with sort of this new model of how brands and communities can actually interact. With the way that I like to think about it is that the brands are kind of, they're holding the space for the community. The community comes together around the set of values, and the brands are attracted. The sponsors are attracted because of the community, and they share these values in common. And then they hold that space. There's this capital labor, interplay, like this, the old economic, paradigm of that, where you're like, okay, we're all going to work in tandem based on the same goals in order to achieve those. We're going to have sponsors, helping, pay for lunch and pay for venue, and show up with their people and their teams and their communities. And we're going to have a community that's even beyond that to really grow these ideas, and everyone benefits. There's no like, oh, flashing lights, like these people gave more money. There's no walking around aimlessly listening to talks that you're like, what is this about? And just having like, logos shoved in your face. None of that's happening. Or really, it's more of this, like, how do we all just like infuse these ideas into this community? So I think that's a really interesting thing to play with. And I could definitely see, that being a continued narrative moving into the future of how this brand, I say brand is sort of a catch-all, but, for any kind of DAO or organization that has some kind of story to tell, right? Some community to build. is I think the shared community that revolves around a set of values and then is held together and supported by a set of brands that share those values is a more sustainable model than the way that we've been doing things, which is every brand build your own community, build your own audience, start from scratch, and then make people stay in your platform, in your space just for you. That I think we're going to see that going away. And I think events and these IRL experiences are really how we're going to start to conceptualize what that looks like in the future. And so I think MCON plays a really interesting role in what we're gonna what we're gonna see happen and what experiments we can continue to do next.
Right. Yeah, super in the spirit of Web3, and yeah, like we're all building this network effect together, and yeah, it makes most sense to share it. All right, let's proceed. So mcon.fun, go and apply. Do it. Anything else you want to add on that, Yalor, before we move on?
No, I'm super excited. It's going to be the best one yet. We say that every year, but it really is true. So come hang out with us in Detroit, Michigan, which is a new home for MCON.
The choice of Detroit, I like it. Yeah, the ex-industrial city of America that saw its downfall and then rose up, or is rising up. Yeah, you wanna allegedly.
Allegedly.
No, I'm just shit posting.
It's definitely a complex thing happening in Detroit. And so MetaCartel, of course, overwhelmingly chose Detroit for this. It was put to a vote for MCON. But as we really dug into the space, and Yalor and I went there back in March for a few days, and had some local community members there just like talk to us and show us around. I mean, we've really learned a lot. And it's actually become more clear why we should be there over time, which is really awesome to see. So Detroit, it is this post-industrial city, known for the auto industry and, and white flight and all these other things, redlining and, stuff that in America is a big deal and big problems. But what really even more recently than that, back in like 2006, 2007, right around the same time, right before the financial crisis, they had this other thing that connects back to crypto, which is the central banks of Wall Street, started selling them these predatory loan packages. And then, during the financial crisis, the stat we heard was 1 in 3 Detroiters lost their homes. A lot of subprime mortgages were, disproportionately distributed then. And then, in 2013, actually, Detroit filed bankruptcy, which is the largest municipal bankruptcy I think that's ever happened in the United States. So these are big things that just started, these dominoes. And right around, during this period, the same institutions, of course, that are behind these, the loans and the subprime mortgages, began buying up the real estate that, of course, was being, repossessed. And then over the past 10 years or, 10, 15 years have been, gentrifying it and selling it back to the citizens of Detroit. And that's what you see, people starting to come back and this quote rise happening. So it's a really interesting time to look at it because it really does coincide with this narrative of 2008, 2009, what the financial crisis that really sparked rise to this whole cryptocurrency movement that we're in with Bitcoin, and then later with Ethereum, and what we've seen continue in this. How do we move these models from these centralized entities that are obviously even continually causing issues in our cities and in our communities, and actually continue to move that into more decentralized models. So it feels like a great time and a great place to go and be, in this city that also has this incredible story of music and art and culture, and they've really forged their own path, especially in the music industry. That's gate kept like many other industries and artistic industries. And they really forced their own path to the success that they've seen with Motown and techno and all of the cool music and cultural artifacts that have come out of it. So we're seeing all of this play out in Detroit, and we really couldn't be more excited to bring our internet friends and people who love decentralization and just want to see this move forward back to this place. It feels like a great time and place to be having these conversations and continue to advance this story.
Awesome. Yeah, I love it. I think it's the perfect city for MCon.
Absolutely.
And going back to something smaller, MetaCamp. So we had MCon in the US, and then there's MetaCamp in Costa Rica. And it's a much smaller event, much more intimate. And I don't know, how else would you describe it, Yalor or Stacey?
Yeah, I think we can both speak to it. I obviously been running it for 3 years. Stacey's been attending for 2 years, which has been super cool. So MetaCamp is a what's the word when you say like a causational event because of MCon, right? It's like, or maybe it's the opposite. MCon was the causational event for MetaCamp. We had all these great people together, all these awesome talks, all these good vibes, and yet it was still overwhelming. It was like, oh my God, 300 people, 600 people, like, wow, what a whirlwind of like cool ideas and talks and discussions and topics. And then after MCon, it was like, we need like a decompression week. We need to like just chill, like, just vibe. And a lot of people were saying like, so I think we all got a Airbnb in Breckenridge for everyone to get together and hang out for a few days and just eat meals and vibe. And that was a cluster, like, for sure. It was,
hey, why don't we just do this?
Right. It was like, why don't we do this in the first place? I think you seeded this a long time ago, Meta Alignment, where like an event in Croatia. And so we were all there and we were saying like, okay, but we need like structure around this. If we're going to do decompression, we need the right people there. We need structure. We need, facilities. And Zach Anderson, who attended MCOM for the first time, was like, we should do this in Costa Rica. We should do the decompression part in Costa Rica. And I was like, sounds great. Like, it would be awesome, right? Like, yeah, go directly from MCon to Costa Rica. Like, awesome. So timing didn't work out where it's like, you get people for a 3-day conference and they can't necessarily take another week. But we decided that if we did it midway through the year, it would be like a nice top up, right? For people who are really interested and really engaged. And if we did it in Costa Rica, we could experiment on what it looked like to build communities, to do it in a more of a long term, 1 to 2 weeks, and to engage in topics and discussions that are meaningful to the group of like core contributors, basically. So we put the call out, and MetaCamp 1 was funded by MetaCartel for people who wanted to come. I think we had about 30 to 40% DAO members that first one, and then the rest were just people from MCon or the wider ecosystem who opted in, right? We had people from Aragon, people from all the other different projects like, that have been surfacing. And some people, I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Aragon, but the people that came were like great, and they were more like focused on the kind of the community, and they were focused on like, how can we help? What can we do? I want to be a part of the conversation. And we found that like dropping into like a deeper container for a longer period of time with a smaller group of people was a lot more meaningful in developing real relationships where people trust each other. They have a good sense of one another. They like sharing conversation. They like, ideating on things. And it was enough time where they could start seeing each other every day and doing different things, and then think about what they would want to collaborate on. And so the event itself, the first one, was like such good vibes that I was like, okay, we have to do this every year now, right? It'll be like MCon, we'll do MCon in the late, I don't know what we call it, like fall or something like that. And then we'll do early fall, and then we'll do MetaCamp in the summer. So we've been doing MetaCamp in like April, May, and we've been doing MCon in like September. And it's really been like a self-selecting thing. Like the community of MetaCamp attendees is now not just like tied to MCon. There's a lot of people that just come to MetaCamp. They want to engage with the community. They also want to come to Costa Rica, which is a great experience. And then in this whole process of creating MetaCamp, the network state, network nation movement has been spawned, right? So it's like, oh, what do these, sovereign, like non-nation based, land projects look like, and what economic value could they have, what ways of working could they enable, how could they let us test governance on a smaller scale. And we found,
and then you were like, I mean, like MetaCamp itself was already like a kind of a precursor to Zuzalu.
Yes.
But then you were like, what if we just made this permanent?
Right.
Sorry to interject.
And the thing is, like, we were doing the event in Costa Rica in the same area every year. And we're like, why don't we just build our own thing? Just do it ourselves, right? Like, we don't really want a hotel, right? We don't really want a wellness center. We want like the best of those things with like access for kind of like co-working, conferencing, and we want things that are specific to our needs, right? So we needed to design something that was much more aligned with our interests and the needs of the community. So over doing the event for 3 years, we really found out what those needs were, and we asked the community themselves how they would feel about investing some of their capital or their shitcoins into building a center that was specifically for this. And the answer was like checks in the door, basically. People just started sending crypto. So we raised all the money we needed from the community to buy the land. We have like 15 acres, which is like 60,000 square meters of land in Costa Rica. And we are building like a massive campus basically to house this event, but also to do other events, right? Because we want this thing to be sustainable and to be accessible by different projects all across the ecosystem. So we're building, facilities for like 90 people where you can do a conference, you could do a gathering, a team offsite, all kinds of things, and different things can happen in tandem. And you might see people from the Optimism team in the hallway. You might see the Decent DAO team doing their offsite, where you have synchronistic people coming into town, attending different events, doing their own thing at the campus, but they share meals, they share conversation, they share discussion, they have their own breakout rooms, their own workshop areas, and some part of the events are designed for you to see other people from the community who are also working on adjacent tech or things that you're interested in, and you would opt into that, right? Where you're like, cool, we want to do this thing together, build in the public, but not like at ETH Denver, right? Not like at DevCon where there's so much stuff happening. It's more like we want to drop into a specific container with a bunch of people who are really interested in the kind of things we're working on and share ideas or conversations with them. And the future I could see is like we could be doing this at Eigen Foundation very easily, where it's like, hey, we have so many ideas that we want to execute on and we need so many partners and teams. We invite all of our partners and teams to come. And a lot of those teams are 3 people, 5 people, like maybe it's 1 person, but where we're like, we just want to spend some time with you and have the team around so we can workshop stuff, and we want to have nice meals. We want to have good places to stay where there's a little bit of fun, adventure, creativity. And that is this new space, this new like novel meta campus, which is what we're calling it, which enables all of these kind of like things that happen at conferences, but you actually don't need the conference to happen, right? You just need the Schelling point of saying, we're all going here. And especially if you're like a foundation or an organization that has significant resources, it's a wise investment to take those resources and say, we're going to run this standalone event like MCON. And we're going to say, we're going to be here. You're invited. Come hang out with us. Come spend time, a week or 2 weeks. Drop into the discussions that are happening because we would like to have you there, right? For anyone who, knows how any of these things work, it's a great invite, right? It's an amazing opportunity. And you're like, I'll definitely be there, right? So we're thinking about like, what does that look like for DAOs, right? How do we open it up to DAOs who have, diverse stakeholders from all across the world? It's like some people are like part of the core team of the DAO and others are more like adjacent, but they could opt into an experience where the DAO is coming together and they could buy themselves a ticket, right, to come to this event where they're going to connect with all the people and all the things that are helping move the ecosystem they care about forward. So that's how we've been envisioning it and thinking it. And we're getting a lot of good feedback from people as we have these conversations with teams like Optimism and Pocket Network and others.
I love it.
And then there's camp. There's more camp focused stuff. And I think actually like I would like to hear from Stacey on the social layer of camp because I think she has a really good grasp of that.
Yeah, I think that so as I started going, I guess last year, and I went my second one just last month, I think. Super fun time. It's hard to complain about being in Costa Rica for a couple of weeks with really cool people. You really can't. You can't beat it. I think what's interesting is is always seeing who's there. There's a rotating, group of people. Like some people will come to most of them. Some people like trade off and, will, like skip one and come to the next one. And so it's always a really interesting and good mix of, like people who have been there before and new people. And one of the things I've been really interested in is just seeing how you can create these non-work related activities there to just facilitate connection. So I've been loving doing things like, sitting down and doing, like tarot card pulls or, doing, fun things that are more like spiritual or like connection based, but aren't like, oh, I'm going to do a workshop on this. But that are more about just, hey, let's just go and be people together and let's see what happens. And what I found happens is some really cool relationships, or, going deep with people in ways that become these foundations of future maybe work partnerships and collaborations, but really do become these relationships that affect all areas of my life in really cool ways. And one of the other things we started doing after the last one was having these like monthly social calls of just, we've been experimenting with different ways of doing that. What does it look like to have a community call for like a regular community where it's just really, there's no point. There's no like objective. We're just here to hang out and talk and
Isn't
connect.
that funny too? Like we're having community calls for a community, whereas in our ecosystem, you have community calls for your project.
Yeah.
And we're like, it's funny or weird to have community calls where you don't need to do anything. You just show up and say, hey.
Yeah. You're just like, oh, yeah. Like, this is what I'm up to. This is like, oh, it's nice to see you all. Like, just hanging out with your friends. And it's been really fun to see that grow. And I think we'll play with, more structure, less structure, somewhere in between. Like, we had one where people just literally showed up and said, hey, and, shared what they were up to. And we've had some where we're really like a lot of structure to try to get, people to participate in each other's projects. And I think both have been really valuable. So there's these interesting, I think one of the other things I'll say is that being a part of a community with maybe 150 or so people in the Telegram channel, where not everyone have I met, maybe half of them I haven't met at all. And then half of them, some of them I've spent these like longer periods of time and I know them really well. And there's this spectrum of how well I as an individual might know each person. But what I intuit and what I think we're experiencing is that there's just a group cohesion because of these shared experiences, where even if I don't know a certain person, just their membership in this community creates this powerful, vouch for them. So if anyone on that Telegram channel like comes in, sends me a DM about something, and it's like, hey, like I've got this going on. Would you chat, or would you like take a look or whatever? Like tell me do you have any advice? I think like I would respond in a reasonable amount of time. And I think if I did that with anybody, like pretty much they would respond to me. And that's a really powerful social tool that I think we're just beginning to tap into now, is like, what can you even do with that? Like what, I don't even think we've started to think about, as a species, what you might do with that kind of network. Maybe some people have, maybe Yalor, you have more. But I think this is a really powerful tool that creates this cohesion that really transcends a physical space and a physical experience, and creates this other realm of values and connection.
Yeah, we're thinking a lot about reputation and identity at Eigen Foundation right now. So this is all like in the wheelhouse of extrapolation and implementation of like how do we enable more of this stuff with our work, like in a tangible, like a real, like human centric way, not just like state down mandated reputation systems that don't factor in all of the diverse connections, but like in a meaningful, flexible, like living organism kind of way. So yeah, there's like a, in my brain, there's new pathways forming, and that like it's like the word, I don't even have the words yet of like how it's going to look in the future. But the funny thing is, with MetaCamp, you don't need the words, you just feel it, right? You're there, you know the effects, you know what it's like to have a network afterwards, you know what it's like to be able to reach out to anyone and get any resources you need. You need help with funding, help with the dev team, you need help with some feedback on a blog post. Like all of those things are there, and they're at your disposal because you're part of this network, and no one's getting paid to be there. You are self-opting into the network of really valuable people who you like spending time and contributing resources towards.
Right. And it's great how you don't even necessarily have to speak to that person, but just by the fact that you are together in that group, you already trust them, and you know that you can work with them, and there's at least a few people there who would vouch for them in some way. If you have any spicy opinions that others don't agree with you on, if you have something on your mind, you can share it now. Otherwise, I will skip to the final question.
Spicy opinions that others don't agree with me on. Okay, maybe this is not that spicy, but financial games are not the thing that will move the world forward and save us from impending collapse. That is my maybe.
It's not going to be meme coins and gambling.
It's not going to be gambling and meme coins.
Degens hate you for this one simple truth.
It's not even going to be the income security from your job. Like those will not be the things that move the world forward in the way that which we need. Maybe that's not that spicy, but that's my true belief.
That's the next
question. What do you think will?
That's the next question.
You have some time to think while Stacey speaks.
I mean, I think I know what you might not have words to say that you believe, because I think you're living it out actually. And I think this is the meta, right? Is that it might not be, it's probably not financial gains, right? we played those for thousands of years. Here we are, we're here. Like if we like where we are, then we know what gets us there. But in order to take the next step, I think it is around these like real relationships and real community actually forming a container for growth and progress. And that those smaller spaces that, right now we're experimenting with it in IRL stuff, right? And maybe those become digital, but at least in real life, we can connect and build relationships and learn about each other and start to build and ideate. And there's this whirlpool of things that comes out of that, it looks like, quote, community, but it's real community that's actually taking us back to our roots, ancestrally. And allowing us to capitalize, not in a financial capitalized way necessarily, but capitalize on, leverage the social capital of communities. And I think that's probably the next meta.
Touche. I was going
to
say,
coins, invest in relationships.
Mic drop. I was just going to equate it to the mycelium network that underlies the forest. The value that comes from the forest is not the wood that we chop down and sell. It is not even in the, production, the economic production of what we can extract from it. It is in the fiber underneath the dirt, right? Everything that connects the growth layer, everything that allows things to build up and to structurally come upon that. That's the layer that we've tapped into with this social network, right? With regenerative community development. That's where we need to invest. Time, energy, money, and we need to it has been eroded. We are like a farm with the topsoil that has been stripped off of it. We need to reinvest into that social fabric so that we have a strong connection layer as humans, like human to human, not human to the government or the human to my bank, right? Or human to the social media platforms. It's like we need to find ways of connecting and weaving together our communities again, because we become disconnected. And once we do that, all of the other stuff stems up and grows up from that. It's like, it's the oldest meme in the book, is like, we mimic nature. And the worse we mimic nature, the worse our reality will be. But the closer we mimic nature, the better our reality will be, because we're following something that is already a natural system that functions and works. We just need to be consumed by it, really, and learn and listen and watch and become students of nature again and take mushrooms.
Well said. Of course. All right. Well, thank you both for coming on. This has been a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to MCON, to MetaCampus, and all the other good stuff that comes out of it.
We're looking forward to having you and Anita at MetaCamp maybe next year.
I hope so. Maybe MetaFest at MetaCamp.
There you go. We'll do
MetaCampus.
Let's do a pop-up event.
MetaCampus Fest.
MetaCamp is already talking about doing a pop-up event around DevCon for Thailand, so it could happen where there's a global MetaCamp. I'm not in control. So I do not know. Ask the community.
There's some alpha in here. All right.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you.
Yeah,
guys.
thanks.
Appreciate it.
And talk to you soon.
Ciao.